Hi, good afternoon, and this is Ashley Cartwright, the Vice Chair of the New York State Bar Association Committee on Animals and the Law. I am very delighted to have Jeremy Cohen with us here today, and so as not to take up too much of his time, because that's who we're all here to listen to, not me, I just wanted to give a brief welcome and a little bit of information about Jeremy, and then I will hand it over to him. So Jeremy Cohen is the founder of Boston Dog Lawyers. In 2016, his law firm became the first law firm in Massachusetts dedicated to pets and their owners, and in the last 3 years, his staff has handled more than 1,500 calls from pet owners and pet professionals in need of counsel from around the country. His case selection involves defending dangerous dogs in lawsuits, pet custody disputes, wrongful pet injury/death, and counsel to pet-related businesses. With more than 12,000 Facebook followers and 3,500 on Twitter, Boston Dog Lawyers has been featured on local and national television news. Attorney Cohen is a regular guest on WBZ Radio in Boston and is a columnist for Simply Pets magazine. He has spoken at Boston area high schools and law schools. His firm has been developing affiliates in other states as part of his long-term goal of becoming nationwide. Boston Dog Lawyers is currently a subject for a developing reality show and book. And I have already spoken with Jeremy briefly before this, and I know he has a lot of great information to share, and a lot of you will find that information useful, and he's very engaging. So with that, Jeremy, I hand it over to you.
Thank you, Ashley, and thanks everybody for having me and for tuning in during your lunchtime. So my plan is to entertain you a bit and give you some information on how I've begun this firm. The first thing is it's important for me that you see it's just Boston Dog Lawyers. The firm, my name is not on it, and that's because I want this to exist long after me. So while it's great to be part of it, I think it's more important that the concept is out there so that one day there can be a version of Boston Dog Lawyers for everybody around the country. So just to walk you through the agenda, typical first question, what is a Boston Dog Lawyer? And that's something that my parents still call me about. What is it that you're doing? What kind of law? But I'll walk you through how I came to be a dog lawyer. The firm's strategy, when we take cases or take calls, it's all about making it personal. And you'll see as I go through how easy it is for me to make it personal, because I've had some of the same experiences that my clients have had. Then our mission, it's very reasonable, is to get to the right decision the right way on any type of case we take before any type of hearing authority. So when I'm there criticizing hearing authorities or maybe judges in a passive-aggressive way saying, I don't think they're doing the right thing, I just want them to get to whatever decision they're going to get to the right way by using facts and experts and not giving in to the loudest voices in the room. And in some of these cases, that may end up leading to a loss for us, but at least I can guarantee my client that they got a fair hearing. And my experience is most people, when it comes to dog cases, any type of case right now, they're not getting fair hearings in any type of tribunal. And the motto since day one is it's time to bark back. And it's something that I have to rely on every day because I get a lot of grief from opposing counsel, judges, people just say, what is it that you're doing? That's not how we do it. There's a set way of how these cases get handled, and that's just not acceptable anymore because the set way is the wrong way. Briefly, some of the challenges of being a pet-only lawyer are that the law is not in our favor because it really hasn't been tested. And those who've come before us, they may have had voices, but it's baby steps. So they may have accomplished certainly some things, but the fact that in every state pets are still considered property is a huge obstacle to compensating pet owners and punishing wrongdoers when it comes to bringing the cases to court. Another challenge is fees. A lot of people think that I'm an extension of a rescue or a shelter, or they just say, just write it off. And my response is, there hasn't been a firm like this. And so it's business. And the only way we're going to get more lawyers attracted to it is if we charge and make money. And so if I do it for free now, then we're going to close. We'll be closed in a few years, and then so many other pet owners will miss out on the opportunity to have a voice for themselves. And then I get a lot of guilt. If you don't take this case, my dog will die. Or I wish what happened to my dog happens to yours because you won't take my case, and things like that. And that's a struggle for me because my upbringing, my parents, I want to please everybody, but that becomes a real struggle. But I have to think of what's in the best interest of the business overall. And lastly, people ask, well, what are your goals? It's very simple for me. I don't have a goal. My goal is one thing: to be better tomorrow than I am today. And that means be a better lawyer, be a better listener for the clients, be a better activist in court, and just see that our numbers in terms of our awareness is increasing every day. Because if I set a 5-year plan, I have nothing to compare this to. So I wouldn't know how to set a 5-year plan. It hasn't, to my knowledge, been done before on a firm that just focuses on pets. So initially there was a goal to grow this thing and go nationwide within a set number of years. And some folks have talked to me about that, but that's extremely difficult. And if I set a timeline for that and we don't make it, I'm just going to be disappointed. So instead, I'm just very happy because we're better tomorrow than we're going to be today. Very quickly, how I got into this. I was a lawyer for an insurance company for 10 years, part of GE. And there's certainly obstacles to getting ahead when you declare that you want to be a vice president. I learned that the vice presidents who are there already try to keep you down because you're gunning for their job. And then I did debt collection work where I had a law firm of 25 employees for about 7 or 8 years. And that's just not fun. And everybody in that room in the office is in a bad mood because you're calling people to ask for them to part with their money. And you don't see any smiles on clients' faces if you recover money for them, especially when your clients are American Express and other credit card companies. They really don't care about you as a lawyer. So it was not rewarding. And I just wanted to have more of an impact on everyday life. I was not happy being a lawyer for the first 20 years of my career. And I just was resigned to that. But then, everything happens for a reason. And in 2008, my stepkids had a dog with their dad. And we'll get into that case of Jesse in a second. And suddenly I was, in a good way, struck by lightning. And since that time, it's been a fire in my belly. And fortunately, after a number of years, in 2016, I was able to separate from all the other types of law that I do and open Boston Dog Lawyers. In terms of the coaching and the strategy, I've been a high school basketball coach before, and I really look at these cases as games, and the arenas, the courtrooms of the arenas, and the strategy involves so much. Who are you going to pick as your witnesses? Are you going to go in firing on cross-exam, or you just want to, if it's a victim, are you just going to be passive with them? Who's the referee? Who are the judges? What do you know about them? And that's a lot of fun. And I love having a group of witnesses, and based on what we need, I'll pick and choose who we're going to plug in. And that keeping it a game keeps it fun for me. So there's basically 4 types of cases. There's dangerous dogs. We defend dogs who are deemed dangerous because they bit somebody or another dog. And we do that in a reasonable fashion because some dogs should be put down. Also, we'll defend lawsuits of people who were bit, sue my clients who don't have insurance or their homeowner's coverage won't cover it. And that's about educating the plaintiff's lawyer about the difference between insurance dollars, which we don't have, and personal dollars. So we try to settle for much less than their initial expectation of what an insurance company would do, because insurance companies, for the most part, pay out on these cases, and we find reasons not to. There's always a reason a dog bites. And sometimes if that person who was bit, teased, tormented, the dog trespassed or committed another tort, they don't have to be paid, or their liability can be imputed. So in certain states, the amount of their liability would reduce their reward. Pet custody disputes, that's about 30 or 40% of the volume. And that's not married folks. That's people who decide to move in together, played house, got a pet, cat, dog, and then split up. and now they're fighting over who should get it, or should they even have shared custody. We get into wrongful pet injury, some veterinary malpractice, but mostly groomers, dog walkers, boarding facilities, daycare, where they're negligent and they've done something wrong, and they don't want to be held accountable because they never have been held accountable. We also deal with very few, but some cruelty cases where the charges are based on neglect, so a gray area. I'd never take a case if there's physical abuse. And of course, I vet these cases before I'll jump in. So I've only had a few, but it's where it's so subjective, at least, especially in Massachusetts now, with what is neglect, that we just want to get to the right decision the right way. And we also represent some small pet businesses who are smart enough to sign up with us, and then they kind of have a shield around them because I'm not going to sue them if they're a client. So most important thing is these calls come in because everybody wants to, they got to give they got to be heard. Their vet didn't listen to them. Someone online hasn't listened to them, animal control. So I found that instead of asking questions for the first 7 minutes, you got to just let them talk and not interrupt them. And the great thing is, I mean, some of these are sad. I don't get good calls. So, I mean, there's been a couple of times they've brought tears to my eyes, but people ultimately say, boy, it feels like you've been there. And because we have in some experiences that I've had in my life. And ultimately, you'll hear me in court or at hearings referring to whatever dog it is as our dog. Because I tell people, when I'm working your file, working your case, your dog is my dog during that time. And that's what makes everything I do so easy, because I just consider it to be my dog. So here's client number one, Jesse, German Shepherd. He bit a woman. He had 4 bites on his record, biting other dogs. And I knew nothing about dog cases, but I knew Jesse. He's a great dog. And being from a non-traditional family, there was times where Jesse was the only one talking to me, mostly because I had a teenage stepson who wasn't that interested in hearing from me. So I did love Jesse, and I knew he was a great dog, but he was dog aggressive. One of the most difficult times for a dog and an owner is when they're going to and from a car, because during that time, the owners tend to relax and think, I'll just let the dog run to the door. Well, Jesse was always allowed to do that. And so he would get loose or see a trigger. In this case, the last one, it was a small dog. He went after her, and the woman tried to protect the dog, and she got bit in the calf. So I called ahead to the Board of Selectmen in this town, Marblehead, Mass. They said, don't even come. Nothing bad's going to happen. I went anyway, because at the time I was a board lawyer and figured this would be something interesting to do. And when I got there, I heard people compare Jesse to an Al-Qaeda terrorist, that he lays in wait in the bushes. Someone said that he was like a pedophile priest. He was sentenced to death that day without no one ever met the dog. Animal control, Board of Selectmen, nobody ever had the dog evaluated behaviorally. And it was a packed room, as most of these dog hearings are around the country. They're before a local board first. Clearly the loudest voices in the room won. And then I had to figure out how to appeal it. It was a chance now for suddenly somewhat of an outsider to this family. I became entrenched in it, and the family needed a hero. And luckily, I learned what I was doing. Jesse lived for 5 more years, and that was the start for me. Another piece to the Jesse story was that it made the local news. So a local paper put cartoons in, and it was a fun time. But then because of the internet, people would pick up on it. So every year I'd get 2 or 3 dangerous dog cases. The most important thing I found in doing this work is needing to have a dog. That gives me some credibility. A lot of people say, I wasn't sure, I don't understand what you do, but then I saw a picture of you with your dog and I'm more comfortable. Plus, when you have a dog like that with those eyes, people get a lot more comfortable. And it softens me as a lawyer, so people see me as not just a stuffy lawyer. I'm in pictures with dogs. And anytime an article or a story is done, they insist on having the dog there. So she does take some pressure off me. So I mentioned getting to the right decision the right way. I don't come across as an animal rights activist, because I'm not. I'm trying to do something separate from that. I'm a pet owner's rights lawyer. And because those are being overlooked. There's plenty of great attorneys and activists and lobbyists trying to change the laws regarding how animals are treated. I'm trying to change it how they're treated when they're pets, and basically how pet owners are treated. And I've found that the number one way to do this is through procedural due process arguments. Everybody's entitled to a fair hearing. The government cannot take your property without due process, and due process is loosely defined. There's no list of what are our due process rights, but having adequate notice that a hearing's coming and knowing the counts against you are you'd think pretty important. But I've found in some cases they really don't give notice. Also, part of what I do is you have to stand there and argue with something you've created, an argument you've created, which is fun, but you have to say it with authority because it hasn't been done before, or it hasn't been accepted before. So there's really no right and wrong way for me to go about it, which is a lot of the fun in this. And it's just important, and I'll give you an example, to act as if, you just got to act as if you've been here before. And looking back, what I thought in 2016, how much more knowledgeable I've become, I'm glad I acted as if back then, but I learn more every day, and that's why it's a practice of law, because you get to practice every day. And I really hold everyone accountable, including my clients, the pet owners. If they've done something wrong, I have to point it out. They have to be able to take the blame, because if we can do that, then I can also hold hearing authority accountable, the animal control officers accountable, the pet industry vendors accountable. And that's part of, for me, remaining credible. There's certainly some cases I won't take. And ultimately, it's creating a network. I went into this with some experience from General Electric, that you have to have like teams around the country around you, people who are smarter than you. So I am growing a network of lawyers, trainers, behaviorists, and people who just want to get behind this. And I'm very fortunate that there's a lot of people who want to. So I might have the energy and the access to the courts, but I certainly need people who know about dogs and dog behavior, and luckily they're lining up. Again, procedural due process, it applies to any type of hearing, all levels of American government, state, federal, even the local hearings. And it's still part of virtually every argument, because I think our rights as pet owners are constantly trampled on. Some of the defenses, especially in a dog defense case, go right to the fact that we didn't have notice of a fair hearing. We can't put on an adequate defense because you gave us 2 days notice. You gave my clients barely any notice to get a behaviorist or to get a lawyer. We'll conduct our own investigation. Sometimes the animal control officer did something wrong, but if they didn't, then you try to partner up with them. And there's the vast majority of animal control officers don't know what they're doing. They don't know the law they're supposed to enforce. And they generally, it's all about respect. And if they've gone to my clients previously and said, your dog is doing this and this, and you need to fix it, and my clients didn't, you've lost. Because once they feel disrespected, they are against you. And so a lot of my defense is here to rehabilitate the owners and to get them to admit that they weren't good, but they'll be better, again, better tomorrow than they are today. And the media is great. To be able to build up a bank of people in the media who I mean, there's a dog story on TV every day, so who want to be able to show a story or get a soundbite on certain cases. It's great to have people to go to. So now just a few quick cases. This is a case on Nantucket, and the dogs are in the front there, and you can see it's a favorite picture of mine because the deer leaping in the back. Here, my client was given notice on Monday for a hearing on a Wednesday. He went to the hearing without counsel, and they voted to exclude his dogs from the entire island of Nantucket except his house and his yard. And we argued before the clerk, because he lost at his initial hearing and we appealed it, and first the clerk in Massachusetts hears it. And the clerk felt that 2 days notice was adequate, which is preposterous. So we have appealed that decision to the Superior Court. At the same time, where I have a behaviorist working with the dogs, so we can also prove that these dogs aren't as bad as people think. They just were allowed to get loose. The owner was very careless and casual about letting them run around the island. So that's what's got to change. This was one of my early cases. Nico was just a mutt, which did not include a pit bull, and he was found in this pen near these 2 dead goats that this person kept for pets. But turned out ACO, when the dog was found there, they said that dog did it, we have to kill the dog. But what I learned that the ACO is supposed to investigate by measuring the types of bites and the depth of the bites. There's clear instructions on how you do that with goats to see what type of animal may have killed it. And these bites usually are at the throat. This dog, there's no way this dog could have jumped up to their throats. And I went to the house and met the dog. And we also learned during the investigation that there were coyotes in the area in the days leading up to that. So we ultimately just got a decision about what the dog should be doing anyway, which is to be kept on a leash, because here we had to poke holes in the animal control officer's investigation. Here's an example of being credible. So Jamie, the Great Dane, had a couple of bites under different ownership. And this new owner, this trainer, took over. He's fast talking, but he's a great trainer and behaviorist. He took over the dog. We had a hearing. He said how much better the dog's doing, how much better of an owner he is. And we had a preliminary hearing, and then we were set up for trial. I went and met the dog, obviously, which is a fun thing to do, but it's also gives you some trepidation because you've heard so many stories about the dog. You just don't know who it is that you're meeting. And I don't look that comfortable in that picture. The thing is, a few days after that, they were painting a mural on the front of the building, and Jamie was in the mural, and the person who was painting it, Jamie bit the person in the butt, and I guess it was pretty bad. And so the trainer, who was actually the new owner, and I decided some dogs just have to be put down. So with those lawyers who were involved, and they understand we were trying to win, but once it looked like this dog isn't somebody we want to have on the streets again and can't be rehabilitated, we did what I think is the right thing. And it's great to have examples like that to point to, so that, again, people know that you're credible and you're just not a fanatic trying to save every single dog. The part about act as if I'm confident, but I have to portray that I'm even more confident than I am. I mean, sometimes you just don't know, and clients can be very nervous. These are very emotional cases. And this case with Buddy, the worst thing is after the town goes and the victims and the momentum's all in their favor, and she was crying and it was coming towards the end of the trial. And I wrote this note. It was about to say, we are going to win. But then I just wrote, you know what? We will win. And sometimes you just have to be like that. And I say, if you can think it, you can do it. And that's part of it. You just got to act like you've been there, because if not, as most of you know, these other lawyers and judges will just run all over you because they think, who is this guy? A dog lawyer? What could this guy possibly know? But oftentimes when you hear afterwards the judge say, this was one of the most contested cases I've had in a long time, it's because I just love doing it. So I do certainly take it personal and get into it. Again, these stories, it's not me. I have interesting stories to tell, but I myself am not that interesting. So it's really about the clients and the dogs, and it's a little strange for me to be saying I all this time, but I'm just trying to show you what it is to have a law firm like this. So Lily was boarded at age 13. She's a Westie, and her parents went away, her pet owners went away, and when they came back, they were told that Lily was in the hospital, nothing major. Well, it turns out that she had burned half her tongue off, burned her paw pads, and burned her lungs. She had pneumonia because at the facility, she was shy and she made a mess of her cage because she was nervous, and the cleaner didn't take her out of the cage. He cleaned around her and using chemicals. So the chemicals were burning her paws. She licked her paws, and you can see how she spiraled into a very unhealthy dog. It took 8 days in the hospital, $11,000, but she lived. and the boarding facility refused to cover the cost of care, which was, like I said, $11,000. So we filed suit. The law firm, we go up against the same law firm often, and they filed their usual motion to dismiss because we were looking for emotional distress damages. And the thing here is the judge heard our argument and left that count in. Didn't mean we're going to win on it, but he left the count for emotional distress damages in, so that gave us leverage, and we just settled the case last week for 200% of the damages. So we're starting to see that even though you're only supposed to get cost of care or the value of your dog or replacement dog, there's whatever they want to call it, we're getting additional damages. And that's really the only way we're going to change behavior as well. I just want to move on through a couple of things. This was a case regarding a wolf hybrid, and it involved Massachusetts and New York, which is why I want to bring it up. My client was charged with a crime for possessing wolf hybrid dogs in Massachusetts. In most states, you can't have them, possess them, or transport them. And so, knowing nothing about wolf hybrids, I explained that to him, but I did dive in, and you find people who will educate you. And people want to have wolf hybrid dogs because they look like a classic wolf. Like people want to have a classic car, except the anatomy, the inner workings are modern. They're dogs inside, so their behavior is similar to a dog, but their look is certainly similar to a wolf. They're banned mostly because their bodies allegedly don't accept vaccines to rabies, which is why the environmental police get involved. Here, the dogs hadn't been human aggressive. They lived in a $40,000 pen outdoors. And when environmental police came to get them, my client moved them to his other home in upstate New York. The statutes in every state, they're ridiculous. And before we get there, they're very, very vague. So you really don't know what a wolf hybrid is. It's very difficult to measure the percentage of wolf in a dog, but we know that all dogs have some wolf in them. I went out, I met the dogs, and before we get there, I went out and met the dogs, and this is part of the fun thing, but also part of it can be exciting.
So soft. Now, Luna's more of a leaper than he is. You know, and now Jeremy.
Yeah, she tends to jump up. She's excited.
I don't know. She had the collar and sort of the narrower snout. No. Sit. What are you doing?
Yeah. So Luna was not happy with me for some reason. I did have a pocket full of pig's ears because you gotta go to meet these dogs with treats. We won that case though, in spite of how Luna was behaving, because it brought up some things within me, because I want to be, the people always want me to meet their dog. You try not to look scared, but I'm thinking I can't get attacked 3 days before the hearing by the very dog I'm trying to protect. Ultimately, you can see the language in New York, the overall appearance of a wolf hybrid. It basically, they're looking at what is a wolf hybrid, the overall appearance of which makes it, we can't see that word, but basically difficult or impossible to distinguish it from a wolf. So that law is just going by what the appearance of the animal is. It goes on for the city of New York, the Board of Health, to say all dogs other than domesticated dogs are wolf hybrids, including any hybrid offspring of a wild dog and a domesticated dog. And if you think about it, that's every dog. It doesn't talk about how many generations to go back. So we made that argument. And here in Massachusetts, the statute said the same thing. A wolf hybrid is any, which you cannot have, is any mammal which is the offspring or of the reproduction between any species of wild canid or wolf and a domestic dog. So luckily, when we made our motion to dismiss, the judge said, I'm going to take this home. I'm a dog owner, and this very much interests me. And essentially, the judge, this is such a great thing for a lawyer, because in all the other areas of law, the statutes have been challenged already, right? But here, this stuff hasn't been challenged. So I got a chance to make an argument, a constitutional law argument that it was void for vagueness. And sure enough, the judge found that it was, because it was impossible to distinguish what a wild canid hybrid is, because it's all about the eye test, and the eye test is not fair. And it was looked at as breed-specific legislation, which in Massachusetts is against the law. In terms of holding people accountable, Zoe, a cat, she had gone in for some dental work. She had most of her teeth pulled, but they took x-rays and she was released and she was fine, but then she had kidney failure, so she went to another vet. And when the owner went to pick her up, her jaw was in pieces. And they said, we don't know what happened. Well, it turns out we think that she latched on to one of the vet techs, who then took her and hit her and pushed her onto the metal table and broke her jaw. So we had proof that the jaw wasn't broken just before then. Ultimately, we just wanted the cost of care to repair her jaw, but then that wasn't enough. And so we actually, after suit, got them to settle by also refunding the money for the work that they did with the kidneys. Even though they did good work, you have to find ways to create damages in these cases, because again, there's no punitive damages and it's very difficult to get emotional distress damages. But whatever they call it, a refund or something, it shows that we're advancing the status of pets in these court cases. This case is going on right now. Brooklyn died. We're taking on Terminix, the extermination company. They were cited for putting in illegal bait traps with pellets and rodenticide. And that's a very slow, agonizing death for a rat or a mouse. Well, it is for a dog too. And even though the Mass Department of Agriculture came in and cited Terminix, a giant company, they refused to pay anything. My client came to me and I said, just go ask them for the money, because she only wanted $800 for the cost of care and for burial, and they wouldn't do it. So to get everyone's attention, we sued for, I think, $500,000. But the reality is we know we're not going to get that. But right now, Terminix they've offered $5,000. My client's not going to take it. But the fact is, they're understanding that this is more than just the value of a lost pet. And we really don't have many costs of care in that. So it's in the local media, and we're just seeing where that goes. And the client wants to challenge them as much as she can to try to change the law about pets as property. Real quick, we handle custody cases too. Here's one of them. In this case, Bruno belonged to my client and his ex-girlfriend and her kids. He paid for everything. And he took her to court without a lawyer, lost initially, hired us, but said and I always try to talk people out of paying us. Why don't you try to pay them, pay the other side for the dog? And he offered $20,000. And she said no. Ultimately, though, a judge is not going to take a dog away from kids. We can get it done, but it's really difficult. So here, this was ultimately a loss for us, which is why when you have custody cases, you want to go to mediation. Mediators aren't bound by the law. They're not bound by that ridiculous thing that judges will say to me, well, possession is 9/10 of the law. That means if you take someone's dog, you're protected, because these old-time judges think possession is 9/10. It isn't. And a mediator can actually look at what's in the best interest of the dog, who's going to be the better owner, who has more experience. And the sweet part of that is having tried to resolve it, the ex-boyfriend saying, you'll never get my dog, and then sitting in my office on Saturday, meeting him here because he has to hand the dog over. And that's a sweet feeling. Then, as was mentioned before, none of this was any of my design, but some folks have reached out, and they spent 2 days with me, videotaping me everywhere I went. And of course, my dog, they got into some courts and hearings, and they're working on developing it. It's way out there. It's not something I think about every day, but it's something that's just fun. And the fact that me, who was a board lawyer in an insurance company, suddenly is being followed around it's pretty cool. So just let's, because I want to give a few minutes for questions in case anybody has any. I'm going to skip over. Well, I will tell you about one of these. The next to last quote, she came to me in my dream state. A woman called me, said that she knew her dog was in Boston. Somebody had stolen it. and she wanted me to recover it. I said, okay, where in Boston? She says, in a brick building in the basement. All right. Well, how do you know that? Because she comes to me in my dream state and says, Mommy, please come and get me. Please come and get me. I'm in a basement in a brick building in Boston. And I take notes on all of these, every call, because it's just such good material sometimes. So I said, well, the next time she comes to you, can you please find out the address? How come she doesn't know the address? And of course she said, well, because on the way in, they drugged her so that she wouldn't be able to see the actual address of where she was. So I'm still waiting for that information. I haven't been able to go and recover that dog yet. A lot of the questions I get asked that, no, I didn't take an animal law course in school. I'm not a vegetarian, which I get asked a lot because animal rights groups don't necessarily like me because I'm not an animal rights advocate. If I was, I wouldn't eat meat, but I'm a pet owner's rights advocate. Never bring a dog to a court hearing. Happened once, big mistake. There's no statutes about cats. I've taken cases about dogs, rabbits, horses, cats. Well, you can see. And I've gotten calls on the other animals, but I've turned them down because they weren't pets. And now it's all pets all day. That's the only thing that I do as a lawyer. And I'm very fortunate there is a need, and we just keep having to spread awareness. So that said, I'm not certain how questions can get through, but you can email me even after this meeting. I'm happy to help anybody, talk to anybody, hear your stories. You see it there, jcohen@bostondoglawyers.com, or you can call the dog line. And so many have been a resource for me that I'm happy to be a resource for anyone. Plus, I'm looking for lawyers in New York who want to be part of this. Thank you. Thank you for listening. I really appreciate you using your lunchtime with me, and I hope it wasn't too painful. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Jeremy. Can everyone still hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So Brandon and Kim, I don't know how best to do the questions, just maybe in the little bottom there in the chat, or raise hand, Q&A, whatever, one of those boxes.
Through the chat function, and then we can relay the questions.
Okay, perfect. So if you do have any questions for Jeremy right now, at the bottom of the webinar screen, if you kind of hover your mouse over the bottom, there should be a little thing that pops up that has a chat, a raise hand, and a Q&A box. If you just hit the chat function and then I don't know if it automatically goes to all panelists or all panelists and attendees.
You choose whoever it goes to.
So bear with us, Jeremy. This is the first time we're using Zoom for our Lunch and Learn, so we're kind of all getting used to this new service. So we're not on our A game with respect to, at least I'm not. I shouldn't say that for everybody, with respect to how we do this. So.
Well, it's also possible I didn't inspire any.
No, that is not true. One question I do have is how, what, I mean, you had kind of alluded to it earlier, like when you have to turn down a case, what has been one of the toughest cases you've had to turn down?
Recently, a case that I knew I could win, but the dog had killed another dog, but it was a big dog versus a little dog. And the owner, he could pay, but what I've learned is you need an owner who's going to be a teammate too. And if I can't get this person to take responsibility that they poorly managed the dog, it's not fair to the dog. But in Massachusetts, you can't rehome a dog. So I have to have a dog owner who's a teammate. And I just couldn't put this person on the stand and have any credibility that this dog was not going to do this again to another small dog. So those are difficult because it's really about the dog, but I can't just jump into court representing the dog yet. I can't do it yet.
Right. And how do you find the reception from judges? Is it changing? Is it getting better, or do you feel like you still have an uphill battle in a lot of these cases?
It's uphill. One of the things, because I don't have a home court because I handle the whole state, so a lot of these judges have never I've never been before, but it is pretty cool. I mean, sometimes the judge will bring me into the chambers and say, okay, what am I supposed to do here? What law am I looking at? And that I'm in a position to share that information, that anybody actually wants to hear from me, and the judges, I'll be in chambers, is pretty cool. Or they'll say, you know, my grandkids saw this case on the news and they said to me, Grandpa, you're not going to let those dogs die, are you? And I mean, that's when you know, okay, we're going to be okay. And a lot of the judges have commented on the fight, like that how they've enjoyed the battle because I mean, I have other lawyers helping me now too. We just don't give in, because once I get behind it, winning is so important, or at least getting in a position to win, that we're just not going away. We file a lot of motions to bring the pain, to compel people to get into court a lot.
Right.
And then others have said possession's 9/10. Even if you go to trial, I'm not ruling in your favor, counselor. I said, but you didn't even hear any of the facts yet. He said, I'm not taking the dog away from that woman and giving it to your client. So that's frustrating stuff, but we just have to fight through it.
Right. And are there any pieces of legislation in Massachusetts that you're aware of that may help you with your practice, or maybe even hinder your practice?
There's one that will help, and it will help everybody. Is if and I've testified on this, if we can get insurers to not eliminate certain breeds, that every dog should be covered under a policy through the first incident. And then they can either increase the rates or non-renew you or reject coverage for the dog. But if we can get insurers to stop having their own breed-specific lists, I think that more people who get injured will be able to recover money. More homeowners, they won't necessarily have to turn to me anymore. So that's not great for business, but it is. But the one thing it could do is these cases are so, you can defend these cases. And if insurers can tap into some of the things that I can show them about how you can win these cases or decrease the payouts, because dogs do bite for a reason, there's a chance that lawyers in my position who understand dog cases could be on those panels for those insurance companies.
Good point. All right. Any other questions? All right. I don't believe there are.
Thank you for this. It'd be great if people could check us out on Facebook, Boston Dog Lawyers, and we're on Twitter as well, at Boston Dog Lawyer. Thank you so much for this opportunity.
Oh, thank you, Jeremy. And again, if anyone has any follow-up questions, his email address and number are listed on the slide. And I want to thank you for joining us for our Lunch and Learn series. Thank you to Kim and Brandon for helping us set up our first Zoom webinar. And thank you to all of our members who joined us for the call. Have a wonderful day, everybody.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.